Can civilization enforce order without cruelty? In ancient Greece, a society famed for its philosophy and democracy, justice often came dressed in terrifying forms. Punishments were not merely about enforcing laws. They were public spectacles, political warnings, and psychological warfare. Whether it was death in fire, silence in a pit, or humiliation through bizarre rituals, these methods reveal a darker layer beneath the marble facades and democratic ideals. This is the story of how ancient Greece used execution and punishment not only to eliminate enemies, but to shape society itself. Chapter 1, The Brazen Bull, Death as Theater. Imagine an execution so cruelly designed that even the screams of the victim are manipulated into sound effects. This was the Brazen Bull, a grotesque invention attributed to Pericles of Athens. Crafted from solid bronze and shaped like a bull, it was hollow inside, with a door to insert the condemned. A fire was lit beneath the sculpture, and as the metal heated, the unfortunate person inside would be roasted alive. But the horror didn't stop there. Pipes were built into the bull's head, turning the victim's agonized screams into the bellowing of an enraged animal. It was a gruesome form of theater, an execution that echoed like a performance. The device was presented to Phalaris, the tyrant of Acragas, as a tool of justice. But in a bitter twist of irony, Phalaris allegedly locked Pericles inside the bull to demonstrate its effect. He became the very first to suffer its torment. Some accounts say he was pulled out still alive, only to be thrown off a cliff. The Brazen Bull was not just a method of killing, it was a message, a declaration of state power, a horrific reminder that punishment could be as much about spectacle as it was about justice. Chapter 2, Rhaphanidosis, Humiliation as Pain. Not all punishments were about death. Some were designed to destroy the soul through shame. One such penalty was known as Rhaphanidosis. It involved the forceful insertion of a radish, yes, a vegetable, into the offender's rectum. Most frequently, this punishment was reserved for those who violated moral codes, particularly adultery or sexual misconduct. The punishment is referenced in the comedic plays of Aristophanes, who used satire to reflect on societal norms. In The Clouds, he casually mentions Rhaphanidosis as a known consequence for infidelity. While Aristophanes exaggerated for humor, his audience likely understood the reference as rooted in some form of actual practice. Scholars debate whether this was metaphor or reality. Ancient commentators, scholiasts, suggest it was indeed a real punishment in rare cases. Its goal was not only to cause physical suffering, but to publicly humiliate the accused. In a culture where reputation was everything, such public disgrace could be more devastating than exile. Rhaphanidosis was a punishment designed to ruin both the body and the social standing of the offender. It serves as a grim reminder of how justice in ancient Greece could be wielded as a weapon of social annihilation. Chapter 3, Hemlock, the calm execution of Socrates. No execution from ancient Greece is more philosophically loaded than that of Socrates. In 399 BCE, this iconic thinker was sentenced to death by a democratic jury in Athens. His crime? Allegedly corrupting the youth and showing impiety toward the city's gods. But Socrates wasn't burned or mutilated. He was made to drink a cup of poison made from the plant Conium maculatum, hemlock. Unlike other methods of execution, this one was framed as civilized and lawful. Hemlock is a neurotoxin. It causes paralysis, slowly rising from the feet to the chest, eventually stopping the lungs. The mind remains conscious while the body shuts down. Death is slow, quiet, and terrifyingly serene. Plato's Phaedo describes Socrates' final hours. Surrounded by friends, he calmly discussed the nature of the soul. Before drinking the poison, his last words were oddly serene. "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. See to it, and don't forget." Some interpret this as a sign of gratitude. Death seen not as an end, but a cure. Unlike executions that aim to shock, this was punishment wrapped in order and law. Yet the quiet horror of Hemlock lies in its civility. There were no flames, no crowds, only a courtroom, a cup, and a slow descent into stillness. Even in democracy, death could be delivered with chilling precision. Chapter 4. Blinding, sight taken, identity erased. To lose one's vision in ancient Greece was not just a physical injury, it was a social death. Blinding was used as a deliberate form of punishment, especially in cases involving betrayal, treason, or religious violation. Though not as systematized as other methods, it was symbolic and irreversible. Hot irons or sharp tools were used to destroy the eyes. Sometimes the goal was full blindness. Other times, partial damage was inflicted for disfigurement. Either way, the result was devastating in a society that valued civic engagement, oration, and participation, all of which required the ability to see. To be blinded was to be excluded from politics, from military life, from society itself. This was more than mutilation. It was a ritual of exclusion, a mark that someone had stepped beyond the acceptable boundaries of the polis and could never return to normal life. It's a brutal reminder that ancient justice could strip not only life, but also identity. Chapter 5. Stoning, death by the crowd. Some punishments weren't carried out by officials, but by society itself. Stoning, lithobolia in Greek, was one such method. It wasn't a spectacle arranged by the state, but a communal act of judgment. Used in certain Greek city-states, stoning was typically reserved for crimes against the gods or the community. Sacrilege, blasphemy, treason. The accused would be dragged to a public location, sometimes just outside the city walls, where the people themselves would pelt them with stones until death. This was execution by consensus. The crowd, not a lone executioner, delivered justice. It was slow, painful, chaotic, but above all, it was public. Draco's early Athenian laws, so harsh they gave us the term draconian, may have included stoning for extreme crimes, and the punishment didn't end with death. The bodies were often denied burial inside the city, ensuring their memory was erased. Stoning wasn't just about removing the offender, it was a form of ritual purification. The community cleansed itself by purging the defilement with its own hands. It was law through collective violence, a democratic act of cruelty. Chapter 6. The Barathron, death in silence. Imagine being cast into a deep, jagged pit and left to die alone, in darkness. This was the Barathron, a chasm near Athens where the worst offenders were sentenced to die by abandonment. The Barathron wasn't just a physical place, it was a symbol, reserved for traitors, assassins, and enemies of the state. The pit represented total civic rejection. In some cases, death came instantly from the fall. In others, it came more slowly through starvation, dehydration, and despair. Historical records suggest that political prisoners or high-profile enemies were often left alive, denied any quick release. No audience, no last words, no grave, just a slow fading into nothingness. Unlike public stoning or ritual poisonings, the Barathron was a sentence of silence. It wasn't designed to warn the public, but to erase the individual. Ancient commentators like the Scholia on Demosthenes mentioned the Barathron as a place where traitors were thrown. Some were discarded after death, their corpses dumped in disgrace. Others were tossed in alive, left to rot in the dark. In either case, the message was clear. Some crimes didn't deserve death alone. They deserved oblivion. Conclusion: when justice turns into power, In modern times, we often imagine justice as a system of fairness, but in ancient Greece, justice was deeply entangled with performance, shame, and control. Each method of punishment carried more than physical pain. It carried a narrative, a warning, a ritual. Whether it was a bull that screamed like a beast, a philosopher dying calmly with a cup in hand, or a nameless traitor perishing in a pit, these acts shaped society's sense of order. They remind us that even the most celebrated civilizations can construct systems of cruelty, carefully, lawfully, and intentionally. So we are left to ask, can a society truly be civilized if justice demands suffering? Or, as Heraclitus once said, justice will overtake fabricators of lies and false witnesses. But at what cost?